I'm back. Glad to see you again today. Are you ready for the last story this week? This one is called Honestly, Red Riding Hood Was Rotten. It's written by there's a lot of writing down here at the bottom. It's written by Trisha Speed Sheskin, and it's illustrated by Gerald Gorlais. And so that means we have an author and we have an illustrator, two people working on the same story. And this one is the story of Little Red Riding Hood as told by the wolf. So this story, the person who's telling the story is the wolf. So do you think that we'll see maybe a different perspective, or we'll see the story in a different way if we're listening to the wolf instead of Little Red? Yeah, we might see some differences. So I want you to look out for that and see what the differences are. To remind you of what we've done so far, we had Little Red Cowboy Hat that was in the Southwest, in the desert. And who saved the day? Grandma. Yep, Grandma came and scared that wolf away. Lone Popo, which actually means grandma. And so this didn't really have a Little Red in it. But Mom went to visit Grandma, and the wolf came to visit the children. And who saved the day? The children. They came up. They were clever, and they tricked the wolf all on their own. Little Red Riding Hood, which was the setting was in the prairie, and this one, the wolf was even a little different, huh? He didn't want to eat Little Red or Grandma. He was after those muffins. And he got to do that in the end. They came up with a solution that was very different than our other two stories. And then Petit Rouge. This one had very different characters. No wolf, alligator. Little Red was a duck, and they lived in the swamp. And they got him with some hot sauce. So no, Grandma didn't save the day. There was no woodcutter to save the day. Little Red and her cat did it all on their own. So far we've had some very different stories, but we've read them all kind of from the point of view from Red Riding Hood's point of view. So this one is very different because we're going to hear the story as the wolf would tell it. Okay? I just remembered something. I have to write down two things for you to show you really quick. I don't want to start over. Find a good marker. I write down. There's some words in here that I want you to see really big so you know what I'm talking about. It'll make more sense that way. All right, here we go. These illustrations are very dark, aren't they? No end pages, just plain white paper. All right. Chomp, chomp. Oh, I'm sorry. I was just finishing my lunch. My name's Wolf, Big Bad Wolf. You may have heard the story of Little Red Riding Hood about the girl and her granny. Seems everyone has. My tail is different, he said. My tail is different. Did I say tail? I meant tail. So those are the same word. They sound the same, but they're spelled differently. So this one means tail, like a wolf has a tail at the back of his body. And this one means tale, story. So this is another word for story. I'm going to tell you a tale. Kind of a tongue twister. Once upon a time, I ran out of food. Completely. The cupboards were bare, the freezer was too, and I'd eaten every last vegetable and fruit in the garden. Every one. Other wolves might have lunched on a little forest critter, a chipmunk, bunny, a squirrel. But I'm a vegetarian. That's right, I don't eat meat. Well, I try not to. I love apples, Honeycrisp, Pink Lady, Golden Delicious, any kind, really. But sadly, it was a long time until apple harvest. I hadn't eaten in weeks. My stomach growled and howled. It moaned and it groaned. It even roared. And then my nose took over. I took a whiff. What was it? A girl. Sniff, sniff. What was it? Cake. Butter? In the forest? Whew. If you're really hungry and you smell cake, really makes you want to eat some cake, doesn't it? Yeah. And there she was, Little Red Riding Hood. She looked as plump and juicy as a big red apple. Little Red waved her cap. Isn't it pretty, she said. Yeah, I said. Aren't I pretty, she said. She was admiring herself in the puddle. She's looking at her reflection. With this cape, she shouted, I'm even prettier than usual. Boy, someone sure was full of herself today. My stomach growled. Little Red twirled Little Red twirled a strand of hair. Mother says that this cape looks grand with my skin. My skin shines like pearls. Or the meat of a ripe apple, I thought, licking my chops. Remember, I hadn't eaten in weeks. Time to chomp. But then Little Red said, I can't wait until Granny sees how pretty I am today. I'm bringing her cake and butter from my mother. My stomach howled. 2 meals, I thought. Granny for breakfast, Little Red for lunch, and cake and butter for dessert. Where does Granny live? I asked. Little Red pointed. Down there in the clearing, the brown house. I knew that house, so I made a plan. Let's play a game, I said. Little Red smiled. I'm awesome at games, she said. I bet you are, I said. You take this path, and I'll take that path, and let's see who arrives at Granny's house first. I will, she said. I'm the prettiest and I'm the fastest. I bet you are, I said. My stomach moaned before it groaned. I ran. No one knows the forest like I do. I chose the shorter path. Sniff, sniff. I took a whiff. What was it? Apple air freshener? I knocked at the door. Who's there? Called out a voice. Your granddaughter, I squeaked. I've brought you cake and butter from Mother. Door's open, Granny said. Oh, so clever. Granny tugged at her nightcap. Green, she said. Isn't it pretty? Pretty like a Granny Smith apple, I thought. Aren't I pretty? Granny said. You must have heard the saying the apple doesn't far fall from the tree? Well, it is true. So is Granny just a lot like Little Red? She's pretty vain, huh? She likes to look in the mirror. She really thinks a lot of herself. My stomach roared. What's that noise? Granny said. Chomp, chomp. I had to eat her. She was no Macintosh apple, but not too bad. I still felt hungry. So he gobbled up Grandma. That's what she gets for looking like a Granny Smith apple. Little Red knocked at the door. Who's there? I called out, crawling into Granny's bed. Your granddaughter, Little Red said. I brought you cake and butter from Mother. Door's open, I said. Little Red walked in and caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror. Isn't my cape pretty, Granny? She said. Aren't I pretty? I clenched my teeth. Granny, Little Red said, what deep dark eyes I have. I said, the color of apple seeds. Granny, she said, what perfect ears I have. I said, shaped like sharply cut apple slices. Granny, she said, what pretty red lips I have. I said, red delicious. That's another kind of apple, huh? Granny, she said, what lovely skin I have. He's going crazy now. He can hardly contain himself. Chomp, chomp. What'd he do? Yep, he ate her. I ate her up. What can I say? Things look different when you're hungry. She was no Fuji or Crispin apple. In fact, to be honest, she was a little bit rotten. But she tasted better than nothing. And plus, I got dessert. Now, that is the end. Nobody comes to save them. They're all done. So, the characters in this story were Little Red, her grandmother, and the wolf. And that's it. There was nobody else involved, right? It was just about them. But the thing that made this very different was that we heard the story from the wolf's point of view, or his perspective. That's what we call that. And so if you look at something from somebody else's perspective, you might see things differently. So this is a really interesting way. These stories, this Honestly Red Riding Hood Was Rotten, if you look up stories by Tricia Speed Shaskin, there's a lot of these for all of the different fairy tales. So there's actually one, I think, for Cinderella too. And there's a thing in the back that tells us to think about it. And I'm going to read that part to you right now too, so you can think about this story. Read the classic version of Little Red Riding Hood. Did we read it? On Monday we didn't read it, but we talked about it. We talked about how the traditional story goes. Now look at the Big Bad Wolf's version of the story. List some things that happened in the classic version that didn't happen in the wolf's version. And then list some things that happened in the wolf's version that didn't happen in the traditional. Here are two. How are they different? So that's what we've been talking about all week. If it had been apple season, do you think that the wolf would have eaten Little Red and Grandma? Why was he so hungry? Yeah, he was way out of food, and he was waiting for apple season. The classic version of Little Red Riding Hood is told from an invisible narrator's point of view. So when we read this story, somebody's telling the story, but it's not any of the characters. And when we read this story, somebody was telling us the story, but it wasn't the characters. This story was told from the point of view of one of the characters. He was in the story and told it to us. So that's a fun way to compare stories and to look at how they are different. Sometimes the character in the story tells you the story, and sometimes an invisible narrator tells you the story. So those were our Little Red Riding Hood stories for the week. I hope you had a good time listening to them and reading them with us. And I don't know, maybe I can find some more that go with Little Red Riding Hood, or if you find a story that goes, you can tell your teacher about it, and then maybe you can read that one at another time. So, thanks for joining me. See you soon. Bye.